experience the most efficient system for delivering sulfur and phosphate to meet your crop's needs with Smart Nutrition MAP plus MST.
Thanks to our show sponsors, the Soybean School, Real Ag Newsletters, and Nutrien eKonomics. From nutrient management to the latest weather, market, and ag trends, The Dirt, an eKonomics podcast, is your place for farm-smart topics to boost profitability. Join Mike Howell on Season 3 of The Dirt podcast, available now at nutrien-economics.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Agronomists. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and I am so excited for tonight's broadcast. And based on the amount of questions we've already got, it sounds like you are too. I'm super pumped for the guests we've got tonight. They're passionate about fall weed control. But a few things before we hop to that. Of course, if you collect those CEU credits, head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomists. Make sure you let us know you watch the program. We'll get those for you. And one more thing, we did have an unfortunate event last week where we actually lost the stream during the broadcast. And we just want everybody to know, if that happens again, we just hold tight a few moments, come on back to that YouTube feed. We will restart it and you'll be able to hop on and catch the rest of the program. So bear with us. It is live and we do our best, and sometimes things go sideways. So we're pretty sure we've got a fix for it if it happens again. But if you will, please join us back on YouTube on that stream should we lose you. All right, joining me tonight for this conversation, to quote him, he has in fact said, once you start with fall weed control, you'll never go back. And that's Mr. Rob Miller with BASF. And when I asked this person to join me and Rob for this, it was a resounding yes, perhaps one of the fastest, and I knew it would be amazing. It's Tammy Jones with Corteva. Bring him on in. Hello and welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Okay. I think, though, we may have, hang on, I have to lower myself. I'm a little, there we go, again. I was way up in the clouds there, guys. We may have a bit of an argument as to which one of you loves and promotes weed control more. But we've got a Western perspective, we've got an Eastern perspective, so we'll have it out. We'll see who it's more important for. Big shout out to everybody in the comments. Lots of great questions already. And it looks like Sean Haney is joining from a cab here in Ottawa. I actually get to see him tomorrow, which is awesome. Let's start with, though, here we are, early September. We're going to call this a kickoff to the new season. It's the new school year, all that fun stuff. Tammy, maybe I'll start with you. How do things look in southern Manitoba as far as where the crop is at?
They looked fine yesterday. I'm in Calgary, Alberta at the moment, though.
Oh.
So I'm giving you truly a Western perspective.
You really are.
But yeah, so the great news about fall, and this will set Rob and I up for success, is that we've had some moisture. And so at some really weird times. And so our weed control maybe in season wasn't as perfect as what we wanted to. And then we've had some fall moisture. And so we've got some great growth out there. We also have some crops off, which is nice, but there's still canola in the field. Lots of canola still in the field,
Okay.
which is weird for this time of the year for me anyway. But
Okay. Tammy has frozen. Oh, she may be coming back. This is our
from
friend
southwest of Manitoba, so
There we
we tend to have it off. Beans are
Don't worry, you're back. It's okay.
Oh,
It all
I'm
caught up.
back. Oh no.
Yeah, you're back. It's just hotel Wi-Fi.
Did I
It's
talk
fine.
really fast or what happened?
Yeah, for a moment. Yeah, it was great. Anyway, okay.
Faster than normal. Anyway,
That's right.
yeah, things are coming along. And yes, moisture, it's a thing.
Yes.
We get a rain from now and
Yeah.
then.
Jim doesn't know what that is. I'll explain it to you someday, Jim, and you can explain to me how flight happens, because I don't think it actually. I think it's magic. I'll be honest. Okay, so now the West definitely, yes, variable for sure. Did get some moisture. You've got some heat coming as well into Manitoba. Here in Ontario, Rob, I told my family there was no furnace being turned on in the first week of September, but it got dangerously close. as far as here in the valley. What have things been like? You're closer, of course, to Guelph. What is the crop looking like? How has this cold week impacted the crop?
Yeah, I would say overall in the Guelph area, things look excellent. Probably some of the best corn and beans. We're shaping ourselves up to have a pretty good yield. Down around London and so as we move southwest, it's a little bit more variable with how much moisture we had throughout the season. It just depends on where that thunderstorm hit and if you got 1 inch of rain or 5 inches of rain, how much soil moisture is there. So I think overall things are going to be variable. We still have a pretty good crop, not a bin buster by any means, but I would say this last week the leaves are really starting to drop off. Crops starting to turn. Questions are coming in on fall weed control, and I think the next week after today looks pretty sunny. So hopefully we can get the crop in the bin here in the next few weeks and start with soybeans. And there's going to be a few dry bean fields and edible beans that are going to be maybe harvest aid treatment this week and next week. Silage is coming off and tar spots shutting down the crop in the corn crop in some spots. So always something.
It's always something. Okay.
And farm show. So.
That's right. Yes. And it is the farm show. Bern Tobin, my colleague, will be there. Pete, of course, will be there as well. So if anybody sees them, say hello. I will not be there this year, but maybe next year. We'll try. Now that we've already got some questions come in, and I really appreciate that because there's a lot to cover tonight. And we've already sort of alluded to some of the common questions, some of those very terrible, hard to kill weeds that we really want to make the most of every opportunity potentially to control. But let's just take half a step back here. Tammy, let's talk about why fall, not a literal one, a figurative one, but Tammy, why fall can be, for certain weeds, such a critical time to get in there and control them. Why is it the best time for some weeds?
Well, it's the best time for all weeds because you can utilize some chemistry that you might not be able to use in crop, right? So this opens up your horizons, gives you all the options, and means that, chemical might not be the only way that you're controlling those weeds. You might use iron, you might, just depending on who you are and where you live and what you're doing with soil moisture, you've got some more options here than you might have at other times. The other reason why it's incredible is because you just spent hours in the field going over every inch of it, row by row, looking for all those different patches of weeds that you need to control. So you know what's there, you know how you're going to kill it, you've got all the options that you need for that. And then it's about justifying whether it makes sense or not. So a few weeds that are really, really important would be perennials. When you've got some adequate regrowth, those are going to be a great opportunity to control them now. And another one that's really important is winter annuals, because if we don't get them now, getting them in the spring, it becomes much more challenging and can be more expensive. So I love fall. It is the best time of the year. Now, frost, moisture, regrowth, a bunch of other factors can maybe limit your potential, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. All right. And Rob, for Ontario, where we have possibly the most delightful fall season of all time, I got to tell you, Tammy, you need to spend some time here in October. It's beautiful. We actually get an autumn. But that does mean that can be a very long window where we've got weeds actively growing long before a crop is going to be back on that field. So how important then for Ontario can fall weed control be?
Yeah, so I love fall weed control, especially on the perennial weeds, as you already alluded to, and as Tammy talked about. You just seem to get the soil just seems to work up a little bit better in the spring once the fall weed control is out of the way. So you don't have to battle the chickweed that's turning into clumps, the bluegrass, the dandelions. If your field is covering a lot of those perennial weeds, it doesn't work up very nicely if you're trying to get the corn or the beans in. So that's why I like starting clean, stay clean in the fall with perennials. You're spending the same amount or, probably a little bit less on herbicides, but getting better, more consistent control instead of behind the 8-ball once you start to do it in this following spring. So it just seems to work up a little bit better and set yourself up for success.
Mm-hmm. Rob, this might be the first time anyone has suggested that killing weeds in the fall makes for better seeding passes or planting passes. This is like a shining moment here on the Agronomists. Thank you, sir.
Depends on the weed.
I'm just trying to understand work up.
Right. Tammy,
Tillage.
that's where.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tillage?
That's
In the
Get rid
spring?
of the dry
In
out
the
the
spring.
soil. Get the
Oh.
crop in.
Oh gosh. Whereas I want to kill weeds in the fall so that I have more moisture in the spring.
That's right.
Like I want to save every little bit of it. So that's another reason for good weed control in the fall is even sometimes if you've got a dense canopy of weeds, getting them killed so that they're not transpiring and using up all that useful moisture. And also if they're taking up nutrients and putting it into organic matter, they're tying it up that it might not be available for your crop when you need it next year. So lots of good reasons for that fall weed control. I can keep going, but I won't.
Yeah. These are very good ones. Okay, so we have a solid case, and there's a few other things we're going to touch on. But Tammy, you've sort of alluded to it that we may have options herbicide-wise that aren't available in crop. So we've got perhaps a wider selection of products that we can use. Still have obviously some concerns about residual, which there is a question we'll tackle on that. But perhaps a wider selection that we can use. We're targeting different types of weeds. We're getting them while they're smaller. We might be able to save a bit of money. So we've certainly made that case, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily a slam dunk simple pass, because of course we do still have a lot of decisions to make. And Tammy, you mentioned, and so I want to just start to frame this off the hop. You mentioned cold, frost. Perhaps the season isn't as open and long as we want. We often get the question in fall that comes through. I've had a frost. I'm targeting, say, dandelion or other perennials. Can I still go and spray, or is my window closed? How do you tackle that question?
So Rob and I might disagree, but I think a frost, I don't know, it beats that plant up a little bit. And then sometimes it's actually easier to kill it. As long as you've gotten back into good growing conditions, so there's a few things to check. Do you have any green leaf material? Or is it all brown and dead? If it's all brown and dead, chances are you're not going to have any active growth. You're not going to be pulling chemical into the plant. It's not going to get sucked down into the root, and you're not going to kill it. If you've got soft, pliable leaves, if you've got any evidence of new growth, and you've got some decent growing conditions, so you've got some soil moisture, and you're getting 5 to 8 degrees Celsius during the day, you're probably going to do a bang up job. And it might not be perfect, but then what weed control pass these days is perfect. So I think based on all of those factors, you're probably going to be pretty happy with what you do. So a light frost, especially with perennial weeds or winter annuals, they're more acclimated to those cold temperatures anyway. They tend to survive for a bit longer. If you get some warmish days, get out there with the sprayer and clean them up.
Mm-hmm. Rob, do you agree, or tell me all the reasons Tammy is wrong?
I'm going to say I agree with her 100%. It really depends on the weed species, though. It's like something like Canada thistle, you actually get much better activity after that first frost, because the frost almost triggers it to go into winter survival mode. So it's taking all the energy from the leaves and transporting it into the roots, and herbicides are just along for the ride. So it's easier to go with the flow of nutrients down into the roots instead of in the springtime. The energy flow is the opposite direction. So it's going from the roots, and you're just kind of battling against that. So something like a Canada thistle, wild carrot, it almost seems to do a little bit better activity after that first frost. And we're going to get, we get probably about 10 frosts before winter comes. So we still have a long time before we spray even glyphosate all the way up until November in some situations, just as long as you park it inside and doesn't freeze the booms. So that's where it's really important to do that. So don't park it yet. So.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole other show on that very clever parking of equipment in heated shops, etc., trying to get around some of these things. But okay, so now Warren's got a very pointed question, and this sort of goes to in line with not so much frost, but just weather conditions in general. So we are typically in the fall, we are going to think about cooler days, shorter days for sure. And so there may be some tips there that we could talk about. But Warren's got a question on desiccating of edible beans. So Rob, I'll go to you on this one first, but Tammy, I'm sure, sees her share of edible beans as well. But optimal weather conditions for glyphosate, Aragon, and merge in a desiccation of edible beans. Seems that we get highly inconsistent terminating ranging over a week in different weather. So what is happening there? Why might we see less than stellar desiccation in that sense?
Yeah, so with Aragon, it's group 14 PPO inhibitor. It loves hot, sunny conditions. So this week that we're supposed to get the temperature, at least in central Ontario, it's supposed to be, I think, around 27 degrees tomorrow, and bright, sunny, hot weather. That's the conditions for Aragon. And you always want to do it on a more of a warming trend. So, we've been kind of cooler. We're going to get into a nice stretch of warmer weather. You always want to do that. And spray it kind of at the beginning of the warmer conditions instead of at the tail end of it. So you don't want to spray, okay, yesterday or today's nice and sunny, tomorrow's going to be raining for 3 days. So I'm going to spray today because hopefully once it stops raining, then I can start to harvest. So you always want to spray it on the warmer time. We need dry weather, good drying conditions for it to come down. But if there are no glyphosate restrictions, always add the glyphosate. It just adds a little bit more complete control and actually much better activity on some of those perennial weeds as well. So always check with your processor to see if you are able to use glyphosate. Some of the various bean types you cannot use glyphosate, but hot sunny conditions, lots of water, 20 gallons, 25 gallons even per acre. Use the 2x rate. Make sure you add in the adjuvant, and more medium droplet size is also important. Avoid dew. You don't want to spray it when dew is present, so not 6 a.m. You're better off, 9 a.m. We always say it's the Dolly Parton, works 9 to 5. Maybe in the fall, it might be more, since it gets cooler a little bit, or nights aren't as long. Maybe a more 9 to 3 seems to be a little bit better conditions. But yeah, hot sunny conditions. It's actually the opposite of Reglone. Reglone likes more overcast days as well. So.
Right, which Reglone, actual desiccant. We should make that clear. Yeah. Right. I like the Dolly Parton, the 9 to 5 or 9 to 3, which is like Sean's. 9 to 3, yeah. Right? Anyway, just kidding. I really hope he's still watching. Anyway, okay, so good advice there. And actually, well, first of all, Warren, you have to be. No worries there. He's not up at 6. But we are heading into a warming trend and it looks like sunshine. So maybe tomorrow is the day. Although he did mention earlier he had to pull a truck out of a field. And so we are quite wet still, Rob, I'll be honest. So there's still that to consider. Please, nobody get the sprayer stuck. That would be great. Okay, so now Chad's got a good question. And then I think, Producer Jay, we're going to go to our first clip just after this question. But Chad says, I'm curious about fall residual chemicals for kochia. And I feel like kochia and fleabane are like the west and east evil sisters. Anyway, curious about fall residual chemicals for kochia that can have spring residual chemicals sprayed for extended control in regards to pulse crops. So pulses are always one of those ones that I worry very much about residual. And so controlling kochia within any rotation that has pulses in it always makes me cringe just a little. Tammy, what is our plan of attack for something like kochia? Beyond making children pull
it. So my strategy with kochia is try to kill it in every pass. And so again, fall weed control sounds like a great idea. And actually some of the people on the comments are much smarter than I am and have talked through what some of the options are. So we've got Authority, we've got Fierce, we've got Volterra. So depending on what you have access to, those can be used in front of some of the pulse crops. And one of the key things about looking at one of those options in the fall is that they need moisture for activation. Sometimes in the spring, in parts of Western Canada, we can occasionally be a little bit dry. Those are usually the areas where kochia is also a problem. And so being able to apply it in the fall, proactively utilizing that winter moisture is meaning that we're going to have that better opportunity for activation. You need about a half-inch of rain, something like that, to get it going. There's some other chemistries as well, the yellow chemistries that can also help out in some of this stuff. So like the edges of the world. Again, you want to make sure with some of these chemistries that you're putting them on early enough so that an edges when we're gassing off becomes kind of, how you make this layer and make sure that you've got the chemical fully covering the field. And so if you don't do it soon enough, you have more like an Afghan of coverage. But if you wait and make sure that you get it on in time, then you have like a full-blown blanket. And, no one likes an Afghan of coverage.
That's right. That's right. Too many holes. You get your
Something's going to
toes
get
stuck
through.
in them.
Yeah,
You do.
exactly.
The cat can get you right through the hole. I hope everyone
You
knows
see
what
where
we're
I'm
talking
going.
about. Yes, grandma's crocheted blanket that's on the couch. I like it. Go for the wool duvet, full coverage.
Yeah.
And
So
also, good point. Kill kochia every time you go out there.
every pass.
Okay. I like that. All right. Okay, very quickly, we are going to hop to, actually, Producer Jay, if you could, I want to go to, this is a clip from 10 years ago with Wheat Pete, so it's actually our second clip. I'm going to go first because this mentions fleabane specifically, but also weed control ahead of wheat. But this is a 10-year-old clip, and there's a few reasons why I wanted to pull it. But we're going to look at what Pete looked like 10 years ago. Can you believe it? Here we go, Producer Jay.
So Peter, conventional wisdom is that not a lot of growers spray their wheat fields before they plant winter wheat. It can get kind of messy like what you're standing in here, right?
Absolutely, and this is one thing that drives me nuts. We did a straw survey of the agribusiness people last spring, and less than 5% of the wheat acres get sprayed with a herbicide in the fall, either before the wheat comes up or before it gets planted or after the wheat gets up with something other than glyphosate that would be obviously bad on emerged wheat. And this is what can happen. So what we have here is an excellent field of wheat. It was planted after edible beans. They didn't think they need to spray it in the fall. And now we have a field full of fleabane. So, is this glyphosate-resistant fleabane? We really don't know. I certainly hope not. But if you can consider the amount of seed that we are returning to this field, so that we now have seeded it, and by the way, the neighboring fields, because fleabane's like dandelion, it fluffs off and floats away in the wind, we've seeded the rest of the area fields with fleabane as well, and at some point it will be glyphosate-resistant. So this is a huge, huge issue. It's not only fleabane. It's things like chickweed, it's dandelion, it's sow thistle. We get such better control with all those weeds when we spray them in the fall. So it just has to become part of our standard practice. I'm going to plant my wheat, then either before I plant it or after I plant it and before it comes up, I'm going to spray it with glyphosate, because that does my sow thistle, it does my dandelions. It will do the fleabane and the shepherd's purse and all those other things until we run into resistance, and then we have to start adding something to it. In the case of fleabane, Aragon is the best product that we have out there, and it's something in the southwest of Ontario that you just have to start doing. Don't even think about it. There's enough resistant fleabane there. It's just standard practice. If it's chickweed, then actually I can wait if I want to and spray the wheat once it gets emerged with something like Refine Extra. Has excellent chickweed control. If I miss, so I'm out there, I get the wheat planted, I'm going to spray it before it emerges, and I only have 3 or 4 days, rains, I don't get it done, don't give up, because we can still go out there after the wheat's emerged in the fall. We have Refine Extra registered, we have the bromoxynil MCPAs registered, and we have Infinity registered. And so depending on what weed you have out there, you have chickweed, it's Refine Extra. Take it out once the wheat comes up. You will be a much happier camper come next spring. And by the way, you do that, I'll be able to time your fungicide, your first fungicide better, and the research data says that's 4 bushels per acre more wheat. So it's all worthwhile. Go out, get it done.
Our sponsors for the Agronomists are Nutrien eKonomics, the Soybean School, and Real Ag Newsletters. Don't miss out on any of the content we publish. Whether you're looking for agronomy, current events, or industry news, Real Ag's daily newsletters will bring you our most current pieces every morning. Visit realagriculture.com/subscribe to get real and get connected. It might be one of my favorite things to do, to pull clips from a decade ago, just so we can see how we've all aged. I mean, really. And I don't think Pete could join us tonight, so that's even better. Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to pull that clip is to take a bit of a step back and look at where we've been and update perhaps where we are on some of these weeds and controlling these. And one of the other things that we have mentioned tonight is that, trying to kill tough to kill weeds or herbicide resistant weeds sometimes requires, that layering of different times of year or different products, etc. So Rob, I'll start with you. In looking at that 10 years ago, I still see fleabane that bad in some fields. So have we improved our fall weed control or not?
Well, I don't know if we've improved fall weed control. So I agree. I think I was at that meeting, the agribusiness consultants, and I put up my hand. So I was probably the 5% that does the fall weed control. I think, since that clip, it was been 10 years. We've had, the herbicide technology traits, the Extends soybeans come out, the Enlist E3 soybeans come out. And I would say the last 2-3 years, we've almost been complacent with that technology. And I've actually seen more fleabane the last 2-3 years. I've never seen as much fleabane as I have the last year. And, probably the warm winter last year has something to do with that. But I think that technology, we were complacent whereas before that technology came out, we were using multiple modes of effective action. We were using the Aragon, the Sencors, combining it with tillage. We thought about it a little bit more and took more of that integrated pest management approach. Whereas I think the last few years, we're kind of waiting for the weeds to come up and hoping that the herbicide technology traits will save us. So I think overall, we just can't get complacent. And we're looking at the fleabane, but we're starting to see weed shifts. So we're seeing more perennial sow thistle. We're seeing especially a lot of chickweed. And since that technology actually has the Group 4 technology or Group 4 herbicides, we're seeing a lot more grasses become more of an issue in the wheat crop. And I think last year was probably the worst year I've seen for some of these perennial grasses, the downy bromes, the red tops, a whole bunch of other different types of grasses. So we're seeing the weed shift. So Mother Nature always finds a way to adapt.
That is true. Nature doesn't really care about what you want to do. Nature just wants to do its thing and exploit a niche. And so it shall do. Tammy, you in our little private chat, yes, everyone, pulling back the curtain, we have a private chat for those. You said Refine Extra still work then? What is your opinion of certain products maybe perhaps not being as effective as they used to be for these exact reasons?
It's not an opinion of a particular product. It's just that we know that, just as Rob mentioned, weeds have adapted. When we overutilize one tool, whatever that tool is, if we just bang away with that one tool, we break the tool and then we have to move on to the next tool. So it goes back to, again, what Rob was saying as well, is looking at multiple integrated opportunities to kill those weeds, whatever that is. So multiple effective modes of action whenever you're spraying, looking at integrating some other things. And there is a fantastic question in the comments from Mark Davis, where he's talking about prioritizing fall weed control or cover crop safety and how you handle that. And that comes into it too, right? Are you looking at making sure that you have killed all the weeds and forget about using that cover crop as a suppression type of scenario? Or are you too far gone on weed control with herbicides and you actually need to look at establishing that cover crop, have that mulch type of scenario there and working with that? And in many cases, depending on what the weed is, I'd almost favor the cover crop. Make sure that you've got sufficient moisture, make sure that you can get it in, get it growing, and that it's actually doing its job. And then think about how you're going to fix some of the other weed problems in the spring. So I fully support looking at those other options rather than herbicides alone, right? Work for a chem company. That's the first step in the program, submitting you have a problem and then dealing with it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. We love our chem companies because we need these options, but both of you have done a fabulous job of pointing out that they are a tool. They're not the only tool, and no tool is perfect. So, but to Mark's point, Rob, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on this one as well, of that question of fall weed control over cover crop safety, because I think there are a lot of farmers that are trying to figure out how cover crops fit in the system, and do they replace the herbicide pass, or do they perhaps just change when that herbicide pass happens?
Yeah, and Tammy's bang on too with the utilizing cover crops to suppress weed. Mother Nature doesn't like bare soil, right? So, it's going to cover it with chickweed in our case last year in Ontario. I think when we're talking about weed shifts and just changing cultural practices, I would say 10 years ago when Wheat Pete did that video, there was probably more red clover that was done. Whereas now more people have gotten away with interseeding red clover, and now we're planting that cover crop after the wheat's been harvested because we're maximizing the yield potential of the wheat. And that is probably actually, the weeds have adapted to that. So instead of us trying to kill the clover and terminating it in, let's say, early October, we're planting that cover crop after the wheat comes off and then hoping that winter might kill it. And things like the Canada fleabane actually hasn't really, doesn't die with the cooler temperatures. So that's why I think we're seeing some of these weed shifts. And yeah, we work for chemical companies, but a product like something like a cereal rye will actually suppress Canada fleabane. It actually has the allelopathic effects. Oats, not as much, but the cover is still good. But us implementing something like a cereal rye, not ryegrass, cereal rye, because then we can actually kill it. That has actually been shown to reduce Canada fleabane population. So using that as part of that integrated pest management approach to help some of these herbicide-resistant biotypes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And yes, very good point. Cereal rye, not ryegrass.
Rye.
Ryegrass is not a cover crop. Don't put it in any of your cover crop mixes, please and thank you. Yes, that is very important. And I mean, to that point, you're right. You have to look at, why you're using the cover crop. What are you trying to achieve? And we do have that discussion then also about, does the cover crop itself become a weed? So you have to have a termination plan, whether it's winter or tillage or chemical. But it can certainly keep that ground covered and suppress a lot of weed growth as well, which is great. But you may still end up doing both. And I know that we have talked about that, especially this year with some of the weeds getting ahead. You may end up doing some weed control and then putting a cover crop in, or just making sure that you terminate before any of those weeds go to seed, if they were there and growing before. So these are all important things. Warren would like to offer, the only thing harder to kill than annual ryegrass is pissed off annual ryegrass. And I agree. So yes, we'll leave it at that. Okay. We actually have some wonderful images that we have not gotten to yet. And we've actually probably mentioned many of the things in them and forgotten to throw to those. So I do want to share a few of them because let's face it, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Producer Jay, if you would, I love the one slide, Rob's first slide, that really does show the impact. And I wouldn't mind just showing some of these as we talk about some of the other questions that have come in. There's a question here about adding Roundup. But just walk us through, Rob. I've seen this slide before, and it does tell an incredible tale about a miss. So what happened here?
I love this story, and this was actually sprayed on November 18th. The grower went out there, sprayed just straight 2 liters of glyphosate, and in this situation, he used a product like Distinct. So I know Jeanette Gauthier in Manitoba loves Distinct. She says it's the bomb. So there you go, Jeanette. So the boom actually froze that morning when the grower was applying this. So that section of the boom, you could see it right to the line where it was sprayed. So that's where, when we talk about the, spraying late into the fall, how late can we go? How cold can the temperatures be? This is a really nice indication of, look at that pressure of dandelions. And those dandelions, it's a sea of yellow. It's already gone into reproductive mode. It's not going to take up much chemistry. And those are going to be really tough to take out. This is on heavier soil, so they're not going to be doing any type of tillage. So you're just waiting for that ground to dry out, and you have this perfect cover crop, and you're actually behind the 8 ball. So that's where situations like this, especially a no-till situation, that's where you want to look at trying to manage some of these problem weeds. And if we go to the next one as well, you look at the large taproots of some of these dandelions, right? So, and even after you do the tillage, so this isn't even a dandelion that's been flowering yet. So you look at even when we get a warm winter, the taproot's going down probably 4 or 5 inches, and we couldn't even get down deep enough to get out of the shovel. We ended up breaking the taproot. But we're seeing all the chickweeds, the henbits, the annual, some of the bluegrass, annual bluegrass has probably really been taken off the last few years. the purple dead nettle. Chickweed is probably, like I said a couple of times, it's Mother Nature's cover crop. It's actually a host for soybean cyst nematode and a host for white mold for anyone in Eastern Ontario as well. So, everyone thinks, okay, I'm going to do some tillage, it'll take it out, but you just see this work ground, that mat of weeds, and you can't drive a sprayer through worked ground, right? It's just going to cause too much damage. So, and if we go to the last slide, producer Jay, slide 5, I always love showing this one. This is that annual bluegrass. So this is fall applied. This is a glyphosate, and we used a Group 15 product, Zidua, in this situation, applied in the fall. Also proxysulfone, which is the active ingredient in a number of different products on the market. Where that patch was, that's where the sprayer tender was. So they drove around it, and
love it.
Annual bluegrass has been more of an issue on some of the heavier soils, and it's been creeping in from the ditches. Even on some loam soils as well. And some of these problem weeds don't really start in the center of the field. They always kind of creep in along the edges of the field. So even if you're doing the borders of the field, just trying to keep some of those perennial weeds from creeping in from the ditches or from the grass waterways. But this one is actually a really big issue on the heavier ground, like I mentioned. It's basically like a sod farm when you're trying to plant in it that spring, and the soil doesn't dry out. It doesn't work up. So that's where, if you do have annual bluegrass, these warm winters, that's where you want to definitely do a really good job at managing it. You spray it with glyphosate, it just pops up the next day and germinates again. So it's even in the fall. So even though we call it annual bluegrass, 60 to 80% of it will actually germinate in the fall.
Okay. So it's more of a winter annual than
more of a winter annual than what the annual bluegrass. So there's rough stock bluegrass, which is grown by stolons, but there's annual bluegrass, which tends to be more of the bigger issue here as well.
Okay. So, and I wanted to just add on, and anyone who's watched the show a while likely caught the episode where we talked about spot spraying and talking about sort of that green on brown background. And Carl DeConnick Smith, who's out of Saskatchewan, he said he uses most of the product on a field on the outside rounds. So he might apply as much as 80% of what gets applied on his outside rounds, and only maybe 20% of product when he's doing his spring burn off. So it just goes to show just how much of that creep from the headlands, or perhaps more compacted areas, or from the ditches or the grass waterways, like any of that, like that's where a lot of that seed creep or those sorts of things come in. And so that was one of the observations that he had, is that those outside rounds, you've got far more weeds coming in that way in a spring burn off, which I thought was really cool. So yes, although he said when he was learning this whole process, it was a bit terrifying to look at the tank after doing the outside rounds and thinking, this is supposed to do me the whole field. But he did eventually. It did actually work. Now, Tammy, there's a question here. And we did talk about fall timing, and we talked about, having enough warmth that there's active growth. And of course, that does happen that with some species, at harvest, they get clipped off. But then they potentially do come back, but we may have limited green material there to target. So there is a question here that I think is important to cover. Does adding AIM to what's 878? I can decipher Roundup 2,4-D. I'm not sure what the last one is. Help in fall.
DB 878.
Oh, that's
dicamba blend.
Okay,
that's that thing.
Okay, Thank you. Yep.
Or AgriScript if you're Eastern, whatever.
There you go. Whatever. We have different names for things just to keep it
I'm bilingual.
Yeah, there you go. East and West. Yeah. So does adding AIM to that mix in fall control kosher plants that have been cut off at harvest but are still green? There's also Canada thistle. Maybe it's too early, but how would you attack that? And does water volume play a role? I think this is a great question. This is Southern Alberta. So where you are, almost, Tammy.
Well, almost, yes. Okay, almost. So first of all, I do have to go back and counter Rob and say that if I have dandelions to control, I am, of course, going to use something with fluorazolam in it. So a pre-pass or a Corex or something like that, because I love that kind of thing. I mean, Distinct and Jeanette, it's a great option, but there's other things out there. And it's one of the times where a group 2 like fluorazolam actually does quite a nice job. Might also get you some flushing control on volunteer canola. So there, product placement. Okay. Now to go back to the one about our Roundup 2,4-D and our DB 878, I get worried about too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing. We're looking at a lot of active ingredients there. And so I tend to try to pick my poisons. And one of the problems with mixing a contact and systemics is that you burn some of your spots and then you limit the translocation. So I would multiple modes of action that are registered together, absolutely happy with that, but expect that sometimes when you do some of these things that instead of synergism, where you have a 1 + 2 equaling a 3 effect, you end up with a negative effect, right? And they're antagonistic instead. And so 1 + 1, you end up with only like 1.75, and it's not worth the return on investment. And this is one of those scenarios where I start to wonder about something like that. So either choose your systemic and cover it that way, or really ramp up your water volume and go with a contact and make sure you get the coverage that you need. It is important to note that if you've clipped off your kochia with harvest, and sorry, my hand talking is getting out of control, Lyndsey. I apologize. I know you empathize, but here we go. But if you are cutting that kochia off and you do have a decently open fall, that kochia plant can, produce a number of seeds. And we're talking 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 seeds. Montana's done some studies on it. And, we've tried a number of different things. There are options out there. You need to know what you have for herbicide resistance in that kochia patch, and then you need to be creative on how you manage that. And that's another time where spot spraying might really help you out, because you can manage those patches differently from the rest of the field.
Okay, we are just quickly, we're going to have our last throw to our sponsors, and then we're going to talk some strategy for some of our least favorite new plants, new weeds that have made their way in. Jason Vought's got a great question here. We'll start exploring some of that, but Producer Jay, if you would. Our sponsors tonight are the Real Ag Newsletters, Nutrien eKonomics, and the Soybean School. The Soybean School on Real Agriculture is an agronomy and issues video series that allows soybean growers to learn on their own time and at their own pace in order to become better growers in the long term. The Soybean School is made possible by support from Syngenta Canada and BASF. I know that guy in that video. There's even a brand new Soybean School that just went up today, Rob, and I
saw that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Everybody go check it out. Okay, so we've got, can we show that regrowth? Yes, let's do that. Which slide is that, Tammy? Producer Jay, if you would, on Tammy's slides.
Canada Thistle. It's a Canada Thistle one. Sorry, so just...
It's okay.
While you threw back there, I was thinking, hey, one of the things that we should, that one, the one that you were just talking
actually, yeah, just go back to that one, Jay. There we go.
Okay. So just when I'm talking about that kochia, sure, we do want to control it after it's regrown, but we have to make sure that we've got sufficient plant material again. And so this is a demonstration of one that's too little and one that's too big. And of course, I went back to Canada Thistle because I like to kill it in the fall, just like Rob does. But the picture on the left, yes, I have 3 or 4 new leaves, but they're too tiny yet for me to want to spray that. We need to make sure that we've got a good amount of growth there, right? So that when we get coverage, we get enough chemical into the plant that we kill it. So the challenge with kochia, when you cut it off, is you don't have a whole ton of leaf material anymore. You're just looking at a lot of stems and probably some seed heads. So again, if you're trying to get it in the fall, the one thing that I would say more than anything is don't come up with a cocktail, but make sure that your water volume is where you need it to be. Whatever the label recommends for the products that you're utilizing, make sure that you're using that, and maybe an extra 5 gallons just for fun.
Water volume, water volume, water volume. It's like Beetlejuice, but water volume. Okay, and then we get the effective weed control, which there's another Beetlejuice movie.
Yes.
This is like amazing. Okay, anyway, squirrel. So Jason's got a question, and it unfortunately comes with a wah wah because of water hemp. So water hemp, bad. Palmer amaranth, very bad. These are new weeds moving into the region, so we're going to have to learn to identify them, and of course also control them. So Jason has been one of the unlucky people that has found water hemp in Manitoba fields, and so wants to know what weed control strategies may work in the fall for managing tall water hemp. It has exploded in south central Manitoba soybeans this year, in the east in heavy clay soils. So both of you, I mean, water hemp is one of those. Yeah, okay. So Tammy is getting very excited about this. So Tammy, you may
No.
go first.
I don't think excitement is the right way to go, but both Rob and I
Okay.
have spent a lot of time looking at water hemp and some of the options. Like, this is sort of how Rob and I met, really, is
Aw.
talking through water hemp. I know it's
Besties.
It's
Okay.
great.
it's such a
amazing.
good moment.
in Manitoba. So.
Yeah, a single tear. Okay. Anyway, all right.
Okay.
So water hemp. Yeah.
I mean, one of the amazing things about water hemp is that even fall emerging, like that August emerging water hemp, it's still going to set seed. So it can be 3 inches tall and have a seed head on it. And the more growing points that you have, the harder it is to kill. Rob has done all of that, and he can talk to it more. So one of the things that can be done would again be looking at that cover crop scenario, right? And making sure that you've got a mulch of some sort to suppress growth. That being said, in Manitoba, we don't see a lot of it as an early spring growth. And so you're more looking at some fun things that are not, again, as fun to play with. So crop rotation, making sure that your seeding rates are up, that you're getting your crop seeded early, closing your canopy, using multiple effective modes of action in crop. Cereals are really good for Manitoba. So far, we've had some really good success rates at managing water hemp with those spring seeded cereals and being able to go that way. So I haven't spent a lot of time on fall strategies, so I will throw it over to Rob and let him dazzle me with his brilliance yet again.
Dazzle. Rob, we are ready to be dazzled. How
Ready
on
to
earth,
be dazzled.
yes, are we going to deal with water hemp?
Well, unfortunately, there's no silver bullets by any means. I think as Tammy mentioned, Mike Shriver did some of that work where even the fall germinating stuff, 2-3 weeks they were still setting seed. It's still not going to produce the 1 million seeds per plant like some of the big 8-foot tall ones will, but it's still going to maybe produce a couple hundreds. Unfortunately, the fall, it depends on the crop. There's so many winter wheat fields that were harvested the next day the water hemp just took off, and everyone kind of went to the lake and maybe spread some oats in that field. The water hemp didn't die, and it's kind of just blended in with the rest of them. So I agree 100% that if there's water hemp in that field, it's just going to keep on growing and be tough to kill. The biggest thing that we found with water hemp is you might have to get out and pull it, because you don't want some of those larger weeds. Jason, the one that picture that you were posting on Twitter, you look at the base of that plant, trying to get through the cutter bar when you're harvesting soybeans, that's going to cause a lot of damage there. So if if it's lower pressure, definitely you do want to pull it, stick it in a bag, burn it, and you don't want to do anything else with it. You don't want to let it set seed. And I always say spraying a 4-foot tall plant in September is not weed management.
It's just revenge.
So we got to make sure we use, it's great that everyone's out scouting, learning to identify it, but now you got to treat everything in that field as herbicide resistant, and all pigweed species moving forward is almost herbicide resistant to some class of chemistry. So unfortunately, there's nothing you can do. Like even some of the group 14s, at least some of the populations, but a third of populations here are group 14 resistant. So we don't know what type of activity they might have as a harvest date. But as Tammy mentioned, it has so many different growing points. It's still going to start to branch out. But the main thing is, and we haven't really talked a lot about the annual weeds as part of fall weed control, but don't let the annuals go to seed. So some of these wheat fields are just covered with grass. The foxtail species that we're seeing along the edges of the field, even in the center of the field. So don't let those weeds go to seed. Unfortunately, there's nothing that you can really do to look at the water hemp. Make sure you know what you have in your field and manage it accordingly next year.
Okay, so I expect all agronomists to have a hatchet in their scouting bag, to knock down these things, and also a garbage bag, and then take them home and
Big
burn them.
shovel.
Okay, that's right.
A big
Okay,
shovel.
perfect. A big shovel. Got it. Tammy?
Can I jump in? Okay, yeah,
Yes.
a few things. So when I put them in the black garbage bags, I just throw them in a pile and let them rot for like a really long time.
That's
And
spiteful. I like it.
I love water hemp soup, which is really what results out of that. Eventually, it's just
Please don't
like
eat it.
black
Okay.
tea. So I prefer that rather than trying to burn it. There were so many points in there that I wanted to make, but that was one of them. The other one that I wanted to make is that sometimes what we need to think about instead of preventing seed set, if it's too late and we've got seed set. So for instance, in kochia, we've got seeds and they're just there. One of the things that we might want to think about is either mowing it or tilling it to incorporate it into the soil so that we have more degradation. Because Charles Geddes has done a lot of work where aerial seed banks, which means the plant's still just sitting up there in the air, is actually a way that the plant is maintaining its potential for next year. Whereas if we till it or mow it or put it into the ground in some way, then we see more weed seed predation. We just see that we have more rotting, especially if we have moisture, things like that. There are times where it really makes sense to just try that hatchet attack to see if that's actually going to help out. And the other thing that Rob made a really good point about, and that I'll take one step further, is in addition to making a lot of damage with that cutter bar, with that horrible water hemp going through, that's the best way to spread one water hemp into 25 acres of water hemp.
Right.
Put it through a combine, let those seeds go everywhere, and then have way more fun next year. So absolutely support everything Rob said about pulling it, bagging it. I don't care if you burn it. I just let it rot.
Either way.
It's a fun thing to watch, and then go from there. But yeah, really good points. Thanks, Rob.
If we learned anything about wild oat patches getting spread by the combine, then that just imagine
water hemp's worse.
Yep.
Yes,
it's worse.
The issue we had with wild oats to the nth degree. Okay, everybody. So it's worse. Yes.
A million
Jason,
seeds instead of about a million seeds instead of about 200 seeds. And water hemp will retain those seeds for much longer. So when you put it through the combine, much more gets spread out than you would with a wild oat. So yeah, like incrementally worse. Disaster.
Disaster. Got it. Yes.
I mean, I'm not being dramatic at all.
No, it is this bad, you guys. It's okay. Rob, what were we going to say?
Yep. Well, I was just going to say for Jason, since he found that one plant, and Tega Chalette in Ottawa Valley did this last year, just taking one of the branches and putting it in water, you'll actually start to see it grow roots after a few weeks. So before you put it in the bag just actually put it, because we were trying to actually keep it alive to show people what water hemp looked like. So we put it in water, and then we actually saw how it was branching out. And even some people in Quebec a few years ago put it in a bag, and they actually pulled out a leaf, and it actually started to have roots on it as well. So that's why these types of weeds, the water hemp and palmer, are actually extremely fascinating from a weed science perspective, but just how much it tries to survive. And even if you lay it on the soil surface, it'll reroot itself.
It'll regrow.
So
and if you mow it, it'll regrow. It'll just regrow.
Okay, everybody, if we learned anything from the zombie movies, you do not just knock a piece off and think it's done. You have to completely eliminate the zombie. So this is why I say you need to burn these things, okay? But
tie the shoelaces together too?
Right? Just in case it comes back. But I mean, all joking aside, I mean, you're exactly right. These are species that have an incredible will to live and continue to propagate if we're not incredibly vigilant about yes. Jason suggests that Tammy needs to market water hemp soup. It's not soup you want to eat, Jason. I'm quite certain. It sounds disgusting.
It's like most of my cooking.
Tammy's going to come out with a recipe book for things no one wants to eat by Tammy Jones. Okay. Yes. All right. We're almost out of time here. Thank you both so much. This has been so much fun, but also incredibly informative. That's right. It's infotainment. That's what we're all about here at the Agronomists. Okay. So a few things we're heading into now. Rob, I know you've got a very busy week next week. You've got lots of tours you're going to be doing with all your, I like how in Ontario, see, Tammy, this is what we do in Ontario. We do tours in September. So you can actually see like end of season fun
harvest.
stuff, right? I know, but here in September, there's still crop headed towards the finish line. It's amazing. But Rob, what will be, you did mention, of course, and Warren's working at it. We've got some edible bean fields that maybe are going to get some attention here soon. But in the next couple weeks, what would you hope producers have top of mind thinking about fall weed control?
Yeah, I think fall weed control is very underrated. If you've never done it, try it. I know I said that last year probably, and leave it untreated. You will be sold on it. Like, it doesn't have to be a big untreated, but if you remember back to this fall or this spring, we were battling chickweed, we were battling dandelions, like basketball-sized dandelions, and people are out there trying to throw 4 different modes of action trying to manage these ones. So I think, especially for some of these high-speed discs, and that's another topic for discussion later on, but they're not really effective means of weed control. So I think, that's where we have to take that integrated pest management approach. It's just not all about herbicides, but look at managing those winter weeds or those winter annuals, those perennials. Leave it untreated. You'll be sold on it. And even in the wheat crop as well. We're going to be planting winter wheat here. I like doing fall weed control in the fall as well, even before the wheat comes up, because glyphosate's a little bit more broad spectrum. You can add something in, but if it doesn't, then you still have those options. It just decreases the workload in the springtime because we're trying to do all the herbicide, fungicide, PGRs, cool temperatures. Are we going to burn the crop? If you can eliminate the need for or reduce the need for that in-crop herbicide, then you can actually set yourself up for success with the PGRs and not adding too much stuff to the tank that following spring. So it doesn't matter which crop, you can incorporate different modes of action, as Tammy mentioned. Leave it untreated, and you will be sold on it.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy, and if you have edible beans in your rotation, it's a must.
Yes. Okay. There are some things that it no longer becomes optional. It's absolutely part of the plan. Tammy, some delightful weather headed your way if you go back to Manitoba. I mean, I don't know what Alberta's doing. Maybe producer Jay can weigh in.
Cooling off.
Okay, so head back to Manitoba where it's going to be beautiful and summery. Much of the crop is off, as you said. Of course, still some beans to go in a couple weeks, those sorts of things. So what should farmers be watching for the next few weeks for the Manitoba scene?
Oh, so we missed a bunch of weeds, just like Rob has a few future episodes. We didn't talk alfalfa and how I want to terminate it in the fall because it's a weed in the spring. And again, it goes back to sort of that dandelion or Canada thistle type scenario. Anyway, and lots of other weeds, but look for regrowth. Don't be stumped or stopped by those light frosts that you're going to have. They're just going to lighten up that plant a little bit. It's going to just be more receptive to whatever you hit it with. I think have a crop rotation plan and commit to it. So if you're going to use something that's, or if you're debating between 2 and one's a little more effective, but gives you some recropping restrictions, if it's the more effective one, use it and stick with a crop rotation plan so that you actually get rid of those weeds. Just commit, actually commit and leave a check strip. That's always lovely. Or even just a little patch, leave your tender truck in a spot that's inconvenient or whatever. And then we go from there. But you will not regret your fall weed control. It does open you up to a world of possibilities.
Mm-hmm. That's good advice on the recropping. That if it's the better tool, use the better tool, even if it means you have to stick. Just commit, you guys. It's not that scary. Right, Rob?
Exactly.
Okay. Anyway. Yeah. All right. Okay. That is all the time we have for this episode of The Agronomists. Rob, Tammy, this has been absolutely so much fun. I do appreciate your time, both of you, especially this time of year when you have many meetings to get to. So thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and your enthusiasm for fall weed control.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And Rob, have a great show this week, the Outdoor Farm Show. And Tammy, I don't know, find a cowboy hat. You're in Calgary. Why not? Okay. And thanks everyone. Yeehaw. And thanks everyone for joining us. In the comments, some fantastic questions and other comments as well. Next week, we're going to talk micronutrients. So don't miss that. That's 8 p.m. Eastern, of course, every Monday night. And the week after that, yes, I am planning ahead, everybody. We're going to talk about soil pH. Whoa, I can't wait. Okay. Of course, head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomist. You can check out our past episodes as well or collect those CEU credits. Thank you, of course, to our show sponsors. And and of course my guests, and to producer Jay. We'll see you next week, everybody. Cheers.